My name is Margaret Wilson, and I am 75 years old. Some people call me Grandma Maggie, others just Ma. I don't mind either one. At this age, you learn to accept names as tokens of love, or at least attempts at it. But one thing I do mind, one thing that still burns in my chest, is when my own daughter looked me dead in the eye and said, "Mom, you're crazy to steal your own home." Imagine that. Your own flesh and blood calling you crazy. But here's the twist she didn't see coming. I had revenge waiting, quiet and patient, like tea brewing. The night air was heavy, almost too still, the kind of silence that feels like the world is holding its breath. I had just whispered my promise to Robert, rocking slowly in my chair, when I heard a sharp knock at the front door. Not a polite tap. No, this was the kind of pounding that rattles the glass in the window. First I froze. At 75, you don't jump up like you used to. My bones creaked louder than the floorboards. I reached for the cane leaning by the chair, more for comfort than defense, and shuffled to the door. When I opened it, my heart skipped. The rain came down in sheets, rattling the roof like drums in a parade. My little house had been through decades of storms, but that night the thunder sounded closer, heavier, as if heaven itself was angry. I had just tucked a quilt around my shoulders when the crash came from the back of the house. At first, I thought it was a tree branch blown against the siding. But when I pushed back the curtain, my heart dropped. There was a shadow moving outside the back door. Person. For a split second, I couldn't breathe. At 75, fear doesn't come the way it does. The dial tone hummed in my ear long after the man's voice had vanished. My fingers clutched the phone so tightly, my knuckles turned white. For 75 years I had endured storms, buried loved ones, and faced hardships no one could imagine. But that voice, that threat, reached down into my bones. I sat there in the dark, listening to the tick of the old clock on the mantel, trying to steady my breath. I wasn't alone in this. I had James and I had Harold. But still, the walls of the house felt like they were closing in. The next morning, James stormed into the house before I even finished my tea. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight. "Who called you, Ma?" he demanded. I told him everything. The next morning the sky was gray, the kind of sky that makes you feel like something heavy is hanging over the world. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying Linda's smug smile and that man's low growl. One way or another, this house is mine. I put on my best coat, the blue one Robert used to say made my eyes look alive, and I walked the 2 blocks to Harold's office. At 75, each step felt slower, but my spirit marched faster than my body ever could. Harold's office was small, filled with stacks of papers and the smell of old books. He stood when I walked in, his face more serious than I'd ever seen. "Maggie," he said softly, "sit down." The way he said it made my stomach twist. I eased into the chair, clutching my purse like it was a lifeline. The clock struck midnight, each chime echoing through the quiet house like a warning bell. I sat in my rocking chair by the window, the trust papers tucked safely under a loose floorboard where only I knew. The night was still, but my heart was loud in my chest. Then came the sound. The rattle at the back door. Slow at first, then harder, more insistent. Froze listening. But this time it wasn't just one voice outside, it was 2. Low whispers, harsh and sharp, floating through the rain. I rose slowly, gripping Robert's old baseball bat. My knees protested, but I ignored the pain. I crept to the kitchen and peeked through the curtains. The next morning came too quickly. I barely slept, though I tried to close my eyes and calm my racing thoughts. By sunrise, I was dressed in my best Sunday dress, hair pinned neatly, and my house spotless. If Linda wanted me to look unstable, she'd be sorely disappointed. James brewed strong coffee, his jaw tight with anger. "Ma, this is a setup. She'll bring her people, whisper her lies, and hope they see what she wants them to see." I placed my hand on his. "Then I'll make sure they see the truth." At exactly 10 o'clock, the knock came. 3 sharp raps against the front door. I opened it to find 2 officials standing tall, one a gray-haired man in a navy suit, the other a younger woman with a clipboard. Behind them, Linda hovered, arms crossed, Her lips pulled into that smug half-smile I knew too well. "Mrs. Harris," the man said. "I'm Judge Carpenter, and this is Dr. Wallace. We've been asked to perform an evaluation." The crash of glass rang through the house like a thunderclap. James was already halfway down the hall with the bat in his hands, his shoulders tense and ready. I followed as quickly as my legs allowed, my breath shallow but steady. We reached the kitchen, where the back window stood wide open, shards glittering on the floor. Rain blew in with the night wind, carrying the smell of wet earth and gasoline. And then we heard it. The creak of a floorboard from the den. James tightened his grip on the bat. "Stay here, Ma," he whispered. But I shook my head. "This is my home. I'll see who dares walk in." We stepped into the den together. At first, it seemed empty, shadows stretching long across the room. Then, from the corner a figure moved. Carl Dawson. His heavy frame loomed in the dim light, his face twisted with anger. Linda stood in my doorway, her polished smile stretched wide, but her eyes glittered like broken glass. The two officers beside her kept their hands near their belts, watching the room, watching me. "Mother," she said smoothly, "you've caused quite a bit of trouble. But don't worry, I'm here to fix it." James stepped between us, his jaw clenched. "You're not fixing a thing, Linda. You're trespassing, and those papers Carl brought prove it." He held up the forged deeds, the edges still damp from the rain. The officers glanced at them, then at Linda. Her face twitched, just for a second, before she plastered her smile back in place. "Oh, please," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Those aren't mine. My poor mother is confused, and my brother here is clearly trying to manipulate her. Officers, you can see she's not well. Look at this broken window, the mess. This house isn't safe." I rose from my chair, my back straight, my voice carrying more power than I thought I still had. "This house is safer than you'll ever be, Linda. And I am perfectly sound of mind. Ask the judge. Ask Dr. Wallace. They were here yesterday, and they cleared me." The officers stiffened. One of them exchanged a look with the other. Linda's mask slipped a little. Her lips thinned. "You're lying." But James pulled out his phone, already scrolling. "Not a lie. In fact, I recorded the whole evaluation. Every word." He pressed play, and the room filled with Dr. Wallace's voice. "Mrs. Harris is remarkably sharp. I see no evidence of incapacity." The sound echoed like a hammer striking steel. The officers straightened, their hands moving away from their belts. One of them said carefully, "Mrs. Taylor, is this true? Did you file a false report?" Linda's face went red. "No, this is all being twisted." But before she could sputter another excuse, headlights swept across the room again. A sleek black car pulled into the driveway, and out stepped Harold, my attorney, carrying a thick folder. "Perfect timing," he said briskly, brushing off his coat. "I was on my way here after speaking with the county clerk. Officers, I have certified copies of the trust and property deed. Legally binding, irrevocable. This house belongs to Maggie Harris and will remain in her bloodline, per her wishes." He opened the folder, laying the stamped documents on the table. The officers scanned them, nodded, and turned to Linda. "Ma'am, it looks like everything here is in order. If these men you're connected with," he gestured at the forged deeds, "tried to use fraudulent documents, that's a criminal offense. You might want to think very carefully about what you say next." For the first time Linda faltered. Truly faltered. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes darted to the floor. The fight drained from her like water slipping through cracks. "You can't do this to me," she whispered. "You can't just cut me out." I stepped closer, my voice soft but unyielding. "I didn't cut you out, Linda. You cut yourself out the moment you treated me like a burden instead of your mother. Kindness builds bridges, but greed burns them to ash. You made your choice." The room was still, save for the quiet hum of Harold's car outside. The officers took a final glance at Linda, then nodded politely to me. "Mrs. Harris, you're safe here. We'll file a report on this incident. If anyone comes back causing trouble, call us immediately." They left, their boots echoing against the porch. Linda stood in the middle of the room, smaller than I had ever seen her. She looked at me, her eyes shining not with anger now, but with something sadder. Maybe regret. Maybe just the sting of defeat. "I only wanted security," she said weakly. "You wanted control," I replied. "And that's not the same thing." She didn't answer. With one last bitter glance, she walked out into the night. The sound of her car pulling away was the sweetest music I'd heard in years. James exhaled, setting the bat on the counter. "It's over, Ma." But I shook my head slowly. "No, son. It's not just over. It's finished." She thought I was crazy to steal back my own home, but what she never saw coming was my revenge. And my revenge wasn't loud or violent. It was simply standing firm, refusing to be pushed out, and letting the truth shine brighter than her lies. James smiled at me, pride softening his features. "You're tougher than all of us put together, Ma." I chuckled, easing back into my chair. "I've lived 75 years, James. Life taught me that storms will come, but if your roots are deep, no one can pull you out of your ground." The rain outside slowed, the first stars peeking through the clouds. My house stood tall and strong around me, my safe haven once more. And as I sat there with my son beside me, I knew one thing for certain. This home was mine. My history, my legacy, my revenge. And no one, not even my own daughter, would ever steal it from me again.